So we purchased it in 2007, 60 acres. We paid $58 million for it at the height of the market, corner of two interstates, and we bought it entitled with 1.5 million square feet of multiple uses. There's a picture of the mall. You know, kind of an old school enclosed mall, anchors, and so there's a few more pictures. Kind of a typical secondary market dead mall. So this is what our original plan was. We hired supposedly the best town center architects in the world and the best third-party leasing people in the world that do these types of projects. And so we obviously paid a big number for it. And so we were going to develop, you know, close to 1 million square feet, office, multi-story, theater. We actually sold off a piece to Costco. We were going to do a hotel. We had just come off, we did downtown at the Gardens and Palm Beach Gardens, a high-end lifestyle center. Just finished that, sold that, and so we were kind of rolling, and this was our next project, and it was going to be our biggest ever, and we were going to bring something to the market that didn't exist. And so we were ready to go, and then the market tanked. There's just some of the renderings. So, you know, 2007 rolled around, and our plan just completely went to you know what. And so we were stuck with a mall that, you know, we paid $1 million an acre for, and didn't really know what to do with it. And so we demolished a portion of it. We sold off 15 acres to Costco. They got going. We had a contract with Rules to Go to do an out parcel. Actually pre-negotiated at peak levels, and surprisingly they closed on it. They paid $3.5 million for an acre. So luckily we were able to hold on to that, and having that income from there really helped us working with our lender, because, you know, we're self-funded, we don't have any partners, and so we rely on banks obviously, and so we had like a 50% loan on it, and so, you know, market tanked, and that lenders always are calling you every minute wanting to put more fresh equity in, etc., pay the loan down. And so by selling off that Rooms to Go piece, we were able to use that money. We paid down our loan a little bit, and we were able to kind of do some things incrementally over time. So, you know, when the market changed, obviously our whole plan changed, but, you know, we couldn't develop everything at once. We couldn't do 1 million square feet at once. We couldn't get the economy of scale. So we just really had to do whatever we could do to survive. And so we did a Rooms to Go. We demolished the rest of the mall, and just really incrementally over the years, just did a little bit here and there. Not the most efficient way to do things, but it was the only way to do things at that time. So we started, you know, the Rooms to Go. They actually built their own building. We did some site work. This was in 2010. Meanwhile, you know, we purchased it in 2007. So it's been almost 3 years since we had any activity at all.
Could you kind of walk us through just how you, I mean, you know, it figured out the market had changed? I mean, what were the telltale signs? What were the things that happened to kind of, you know, really change your whole worldview at that point in time? What were the specific things that took place?
All of the tenants that we were going after were gone. Either, you know, 2008, weren't doing any new deals. Also, some of the higher end that we were going for that was not located at the mall, was not located downtown, didn't want to be in a secondary market. We weren't, you know, Manhattan, we weren't, you know, downtown Miami. So basically, these guys, you know, wouldn't call us back, or, you know, I mean, it was years of just pounding the phones, not getting any traction. financing as well. I mean, to get debt to move forward, and we had substantial amounts of equity tied into here. And we fought like crazy not to put any more in, because we put a ton in. And so, working with our lenders, I mean, everybody was frozen. So that was the challenges. And so we had to really think outside the box to keep this thing going. When we had very few tenants to choose from and almost no new debt to be able to obtain. So after we did the rooms to go, we did another piece. We did a Cheddar's restaurant.
Were you able to cover your debt service coverage?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. We had 2 tenants left. We had Regal Theater, and there was a Sports Authority back here. So those 2 tenants were the only ones open. This was all vacant. We knocked all this down, and so we did have some income, which was very helpful. That also helped as well to cover our debt service. So we were obviously underwater, and so that's not a good place to be with your lenders. But we were able to keep servicing our debt, which was a good thing, obviously. So in another year, almost a year goes by, we do a restaurant out parcel. It wasn't the sexiest out parcel tenant that we wanted to do. It wasn't part of our original plan. We did a Cheddar's restaurant on the hard corner right at our entrance. But it was just kind of what we had to do to really survive. And then another piece, we had some activity started coming back. Early 13, end of 12, we started getting a little bit more activity. We got a couple leases done, so we did a 30,000 square foot road front building right on the road. Sorry. So we did a multi-tenant retail building right on the road, and we actually struck a deal with Toys R Us, who you can see that box right there, Toys Babies. So we started having to shift from the lifestyle, high-end, kind of what we were talking about, to something that really, what there was demand for. So we did a Toys R Us, and we did a road front retail building, which economically made sense. Rents were over 30, 35 bucks a foot at that time. And so that was where the demand was. Road front retail and some junior anchor. And that was pretty much it. We also did this building over here. This had a few retail tenants. So here's what, we had to make a decision in early 13 what we wanted to do with the rest of it. And I showed you, we had the Toys R Us, and then we just had this blank hole. And we were trying like crazy to preserve that center area of the site as much as possible for additional density, lifestyle. I mean, that was what we wanted to do. That was, and it had the highest returns. And so we just kept on preserving that main focal point to try to do that. And then we started talking with Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. And we could not make a deal with Bass Pro Shop. I don't know if any of you are all familiar with it, but they want you to give them all the money to build their building, 20 million plus, and they don't want to pay rent. All they pay is percentage rent. That's it. So we couldn't make a deal happen. We actually even tried to write legislation. We tried to go to the legislature and write something where there would be like some incentives from the government and the public. Yeah, to be able to bring someone like Bass Pro Shops there and have the city or the state provide the $20 million they need for their building. And so that did not fly. The governor just did not like giving money to retail operations. They did not view that as quality jobs, etc. So that got shot down. Then Cabela's popped up, and I don't know if you're all familiar with Cabela's. I had never shopped there before, but I think people consider it a step up from Bass Pro. And they were willing to actually build their own building and pay us rent. So we started talking to them, and their requirements are, they need double the amount of parking that we ended up providing for them here. And we ended up because the site's so big, and we talked about some of the shared aspects that they were willing to cut down on their parking requirements. So we ended up having to make the decision to really go away from the town center concept and turn it more into a hybrid center, which had a kind of power center section, and then transition a little bit into more of a lifestyle section. We ended up doing a Yard House restaurant. We did some restaurants right around the Regal. We did a Dave & Buster's, their newest prototype. You see up in the top corner. And most of these are their first location. Most of them is their first location in South Carolina. Cabela's was their first location in the Southeast. And so once we made that decision to change, everything else kind of changed. We announced Cabela's, they came, and we were able to finish the rest, do all these additional buildings. We tried to fight as hard as we could to have a sea of parking, not have a sea of parking. And so we tried to develop as much, around here. We tried to make it as much of a lifestyle-y center as we could, bring in some cool restaurants here. We put a roundabout here. We did a lot of decorative pavers, landscaping. We did a little park in here. So we kind of view it as a hybrid. It's kind of box, and it transitions into a little bit of a lifestyle component. So that is what we really had to do. And one of the things I learned was that you can't always force something where it's not ready. I mean, the downtown, they have a very, very successful downtown, and it's very pedestrian oriented. It's the only city, I think, in America that has a waterfall running right through it. There's some really cool adaptive reuse and some historical buildings, and they brought in some new higher density development. And so, our original plan, although it had a higher return, although it was more interesting, although it was just something that I think all of us, my company really wanted to do, to bring a product like that to the market, we also had to have a reality check on, what needs to be there, and what can survive there, I guess. And so we had to change our thinking, and ended up being a very successful project for us. In terms of looking at a straight pro forma and a budget, you'd probably say it was a double. But from where we started and from taking it through 7 years and being able to hold on to it through the Great Recession, it was a home run. So we actually just sold it in November of last year to a major insurance company. We sold it for $155 million. It was the #1. It was the highest retail investment sale in the history of South Carolina. So it ended up, working out. We survived to fight another day, and learned a lot in the process.
One of the things that you brought up with like a Bass Pro situation was the idea of percentage rents. How many, or do any of the other tenants, are they paying percentage rents? And can, not anyone specifically, but just in general, if you maybe just talk about kind of the, I guess, the motivation for you as a property owner to want to engage in percentage rents and that kind of thing, or not?
It's a hard, we have it in probably half of our leases, and the bar is usually set very high. I mean, it's something that tenants fight as much as possible. I mean, we would obviously rather have a higher going in base rent, and it's kind of, it's a bonus. I mean, there is some tenants out there that we're talking to here, and we're trying to structure like a really, really low rent deal with a higher percentage rent deal. That just, it's hard to get it, lending or from an investment sales standpoint, when you have a new center like this without proven operating history, it's hard to get a lot of value from that. So in this case, this was an interesting project in that we weren't even done with the construction before we had a contract to sell. So basically, when the last brick was on, we closed. So there wasn't a lot of operating history, et cetera. So, and then this is just some of the lineup we had of Yeah.
How long the lease do they sign?
I mean, it varies. You know, usually the smaller retailers, maybe some of the local ones, will be a 5-year, 10 years, maybe for some of the restaurants. Some of the anchors, 10 to 15 years.
For those tenants that you do have actual sales numbers for, gross sales numbers for, do you have any idea of the relationship between the gross sales and then what they would be paying in rent? Like what percentage of the gross sales maybe would be at least a benchmark or a kind of a rule of thumb?
Yeah, there's you have the occupancy cost. I don't recall the numbers. It's in like the 5 to 8% range, rent versus sales.
Question. You said that the government, municipal government was interested in a public-private partnership. You talked about the 60 acres, you had structures, and then you lost in your buildings, right? There was some open area, open acreage and so forth. Did the question of public taxes reducing it to what was and the current value, did you revisit that?
Yeah, it was. We tried everything, all kinds of incentives, infrastructure, bonds to build garages. We, CDP bonds.
But did they reduce your property taxes because your
No.
value was lower than it was
No, 'cause
previously?
we were in an area that wasn't considered a blighted area,
Okay.
so we did not hit the thresholds to be able to apply for that kind of stuff.
In this case, did you think it helped to have more equity in the deal than to say, like, maybe if you were at like a 10 or 20% equity for the deal, would you have been able to survive with that large of a debt service with just 2 tenants if you didn't have that much equity in it? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helped to have more equity for sure.
okay, so that actually helped you in this deal.
Yeah.
Versus another development group that may have only put 10 or 20% down, they would have been in a lot more trouble in this.
Yeah, but I mean, we were probably still underwater at some point, so all that equity goes away. But we were able to we were in a hole, and we were able to kind of reverse it and get back out.
Did the bank offer you any type of workout or when you guys were underwater?
No. No, because we were covering the debt service, and they didn't really feel the need to do that. They worked with us a little bit, but we had to get a new appraisal every 6 months, and then the appraisal will come in way below we thought it was worth, and so they're like, "Hey, you guys need to pay it down more," and we had to fight tooth and nail and just challenge every sentence and every appraisal to say either why they were wrong or why their opinion was subjective, and hey, think of this, and we had to do whatever we could to put to shoot down some of those appraisals.
What did you learn from the project? Well, you mentioned you wrote it through, but it looked like in the beginning, your first concept, you all spent a lot of money on design and the concept and entitling the land. And as you move on to your next project, with dreams of your next town center, or do you think you would do it differently as far as putting all that money up front to push the project forward, and it could end up not happening?
I mean, that's part of the thing of being a developer. I mean, you have to believe in something, and you have to go out and you have to be willing to commit the money to do it. And that's always the question that you're asking yourself.
Yeah.
Is this going to work? And because you need to invest money. You have to put your best foot forward. And we were not, even though the market was terrible, we were willing to spend the money to try to get the best people to try to help us figure it out. And so that's what we did.
Did you learn ways through working it all out that we could have put this money on your contractors, or not have absorbed it all, maybe spread it out to them,
Say it again?
like bringing them in on the deal, or ways that you could have not put out so much money in the
Yeah, I mean, we could have, yeah, we did, I mean, we talked to some joint venture partners, to come in and help us not have so much exposure. But at the end of the day, they didn't want to value the real estate at what we thought it was worth, and so our equity was 25 million. You know, they were underwriting that down substantially, so they weren't going to give us credit. So that was the challenge.
So in rough numbers, you said that you sold it for what, 110 million?
155.
Sorry, 155. And then what was your total the total investment in the deal overall?
I don't know if I can say.
Oh.
Because you did capitalize on that cost you were carrying all that.
What's that?
You didn't capitalize on the cost and other things, your soft costs and all that was capitalized.
Starting now?
Yeah, I'll make it see something. You guys said.
Yeah, how the captain goes down with his ship.
Yeah, we can bring.
Let's bring our clear.
Yeah.
So the last part of this, we're just going to do a brief little question and answer. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves, but first off, I want to thank Alex and Matt for presenting and taking time out, and as well as the panel for taking the time out to come out on Saturday on Halloween. Perhaps Rick Canyon, I'm sorry. And this part of the segment, I guess this is going to be very non-thought-provoking, very relaxed, easy questions, just so that the panel here is very diverse, and there's, you know, to give you guys an idea of what to, you know, look forward to, or maybe, you know, different ideas of what you may want to get into after you're done with the program. These are all alumni from the program that are all doing very well, and I thought it'd be really interesting to kind of pick their brains for a little bit and see how they got there and what they do, and everything else in between. So I'll start off with asking them, you know, about their career and how they got there, and you know, how you started off, and where you're at today, and how you got there.
Thank you.
If you guys, you may want to write your names on the board real quick, just to get through this.
I passed the MBA program, but not not the English program. Handwriting wasn't required.
name's Chris Murphy. I work with Equity One. We are a publicly traded real estate investment trust. We own retail centers, primarily about 95% of our portfolio is retail centers all across the U.S. We have a huge concentration in Florida. It's mostly grocery anchored retail, so a lot of Publix anchored shopping centers, a lot of Winn-Dixie. It's about a $3 billion company or so. I think in Florida we have probably about 90 shopping centers. I'm responsible for all the operations of our Dade County portfolio and some of our Broward County portfolio, which is about 30 shopping centers, maybe 2.5 million square feet and 532 tenants or such. Equity One owns everything themselves. We very few JV partners, I think maybe 5 or 6 of our JV partners. We have a leasing department, property management, construction, acquisitions, everything, we handle everything in-house. And I started with them about 6 years ago or so.
My name is Andrew Remick. I'm with Continental Real Estate Companies. I've been with them for about 5 years now. So we have two sides. We're a full service firm. We manage about 11 million feet, office, retail, industrial, everything. And then my side is the acquisitions. So we own about 2 million feet, mainly office and retail. Some smaller development like a CVS and stuff like that. And then also with that we have a brokerage arm. So we do a lot of leasing for office. For retail, we exclusively represent Target, Sports Authority, Bye Bye Baby, Total Wine, a lot of your national anchors. And my side of it is I'm on the acquisitions, focus on our CREC-owned portfolio. That's about it.
So I'm Claudia Gutera, and I'm a lender for a commercial bank which is headquartered here in Coral Gables. The institution itself is about $90 billion worldwide. Here domestically we're about $8 billion, with our main lending hubs out of New York, out of Coral Gables, and out of Houston, Texas. I've been with the bank for about 9 years. That's the span of my involvement in the real estate industry overall. And I handle the largest commercial real estate portfolio that the bank has, which is currently about $600 million. I produce approximately $250 million in loans every year, and I'm very active in financing construction and financing shopping centers and financing hotels and basically every asset type in existence throughout South Florida.
My name is Jim Baxter. I went back to school in the program kind of mid-career. I was previously a real estate appraiser in Boston, renovating historic preservation property in Boston, downtown Boston, brownstones and so forth. And I moved to Florida and did some of that similar work here. And also started a architecture, design, and real estate publication. And ran that. It's called Home Miami and Home Fort Lauderdale. Ran that in Miami and Fort Lauderdale. Sold it in like 2008 and went back to school into this program. And so I've always been very entrepreneurial. Not so much of a corporate guy. After I finished the program, I sold property in South Beach, selling condos and single families in South Beach for 3 years. And just about 2 months ago, I moved back up to Broward, retired of South Beach, and I'm working with Castle Group Management Company. They are HOA and condominium management company. They're the second largest in the state of Florida, and they're a very good company. I like them very much. I've not been assigned to a project yet. I'm in the high-rise division. So I'm training right now at Bellini, which is a 24-story tower in Bell Harbor, right on the ocean. And that's a boutique building with only about 24 stories. We got 44 units. So it's very high-end, but very, relatively boutique condominium building. And so this company is, Castle is growing quite steadily. They grow about 15% per year. It's been around for about 15 years, I believe. And they're actually looking for property managers. Their plan is, business growth plan is to hire 50 more managers by 2020. So they actually have, I believe, an internship program with NSU of some kind or something.
They're just now beginning that, yeah.
Kind of just talks. Matt Rothstein told me something about that. So it's not as exciting, not as sexy as development, but it's it's definitely a needed service in Florida because so many people move to Florida, and it's very stable, very steady. It goes, kind of stays steady through any downturns, and so forth. So that's what I do.
Great. And I gotta thank Jim, he jumped in the last minute on all this, so I appreciate it. And Jim gave a little background of how he ended where he's at, but if Chris and you and Claudia, if you guys could give a little background before, where you're currently at, and kind of steps of how you ended up getting there, and maybe a little timeline of some sort.
So I started while I was still in undergrad up at University of Maryland, just 10, 15 hours a week working for a residential management company, just handling all the junk that the real managers didn't want to handle. So whenever it would snow and they'd all be late to work, I'd be there, 4 a.m. calling the plow trucks and all that good stuff. So that allowed me to move up fast, and when I graduated, they offered me a full-time position. My girlfriend at the time had moved back to Miami, so I quit my perfectly good job, got in a perfectly good, highest-paying job of the people I graduated with. Quit it completely, got in my car and drove down to South Florida. I wanted to get out of residential. I had an idea that I'd like commercial a lot better, a lot bigger, a lot more opportunities, just larger variety of things that you could do. So I got into commercial down here. I was with a firm in Fort Lauderdale and then joined Equity One about 6 years ago or so.
Alright, so I started Nova straight out of undergrad. When I came into Nova, I had no experience in real estate at all. At the same time that I started Nova, I also started a internship with Flagler. I was there for about 6 months, and then 6 months into that and into the program, I got hired at Continental as a transactional analyst. Over the years there, I've grown from transactional analyst to associate to my current title of vice president, where I oversee all of the acquisitions, dispositions, and asset management of our current CREC-owned portfolio.
So, I've always had a passion for financial markets. I studied finance at FIU, and I always knew that I wanted to be involved in financial markets, mainly international finance. And it wasn't until I started working for the bank and I got the opportunity to underwrite different types of assets, whether I was with the corporate world or with international banking or real estate, that I really developed a passion for this monster, right? So that's how it all started. I became really curious, and that's actually a very important word that you guys have to keep in mind as you continue your path, right? So my curiosity led me to continue to seek different venues within the industry. And at one point in time, I thought I may want to be a developer. I thought I actually registered for this program having maybe 3 years of experience as an analyst and a portfolio manager. And it turns out that that's really not where I see myself. And I, again, liking the financial side of things, I think I'm exactly where I want to be finally. And so to give you a little rundown of where my path has been, I started off as an analyst, and really interestingly enough, that was back in 2005, 2006, and it was a perfect time, right? So high rises going up. It didn't hurt the fact that I was living in Miami, which was going through a renaissance, and it was quite perfect, actually. I was financing high-rise buildings, and everything was really exciting, and I thought, this is it. This is, how can it possibly get better? I'm waking up and I'm happy and I have a smile on my face. Business is good. And shortly thereafter, 2007, the bottom fell out. And so where I thought that I was going to create a career in real estate, everything started to look a little bit different. And I had to rethink, and everybody was saying, it may take 10 years for us to get out of this. And I started thinking about what that would look like for me, what's going to happen to my career. So I signed up to Nova to understand a little bit more about the industry. Clearly something had gone wrong, and I wanted to find out what that was. So I started the program, and at the same time, I went from financing the next high rise to working out a $1 billion portfolio. And believe me, every one of those dollars that make up that $1 billion was a problem dollar. So I was assigned a lot of complex transactions, as I did this program for those 2 years, back then it was the Friday and the Saturday, I worked 11-hour days and I got very little sleep. And I did it very passionately. And I did it out of, again, curiosity. I did it because I had the need to acknowledge that I would be in this for a lifetime. And since that was a commitment that I had made, I wanted it to be sound, I wanted it to be solid. So I met a bunch of great guys. I met Glenn, I met Andrew, we had a great team. We do deals together, and so it's been very fruitful. And once we came out of the recession, I was tasked with growing the department to a large extent. I developed programs that are very competitive in the industry. So I work really closely with our risk department to bring into the institution people that are very sophisticated, very large funds. My typical deal size is anywhere from $20 to $50 million. And I do as low as $5 million as well. So I deal with a wide range of clients, from your first generation developer to your $4 billion, $10 billion fund. So it's been very rewarding as a professional to learn from the pitfalls, to see what can go wrong, and it helps me to very quickly decide whether I want to enter into a project or not. And it also gives me the ability to choose my clientele and to have the world of lending at my disposition. I'm having a lot of fun, and it's still fun going back into the market and lending on different projects, but with a different view and with a different scope and different understanding of the risk that's involved.
Appreciate background. Glenn, what do you do?
I involve acquisitions. It's a very small shop, so I do a little of everything. Actually, my next question was to walk us through a typical day position. I was thinking, I really hope nobody asks me that, because it's a very, very small shop. So it's, like Matt was saying, whatever needs to be done, you get it done. But it can range from, anything and everything. So it's a really difficult question to ask, but I figured I'll throw it out there anyways, and you guys do your best to kind of, see where you can take it. But on the same token, Claudia, if you can also walk through what your day was like as before, as VP, right now on the lending side, but also when you were VP of Special Assets, to see,
Right.
Maybe people understand what exactly the big, it was night and day, the two opposite ends of the spectrum. So
Yeah, definitely. Equally stressful, by the way, but typical day. So I wake up, try to get at least a 20 to 30-minute run or workout of some type, maybe breakfast if I'm lucky, before I'm trying to run through my to-do list for the day. So I walk through the office ready to take on the world, and I'm usually greeted by a lot of emergencies, people needing some opinions, something signed, something's getting stuck in the construction department. All of a sudden somebody's budget is out of balance, and I have an analyst telling me that this is not a feasible project, and I got a borrower calling me, telling me that he's hard, $1 million on a development, and we've got to close. Meanwhile, I don't even have a package in my hands, but I've got the fire under me to get deals done. So, so I've got to cater to a lot of different expectations, internally and externally. I think the toughest part of my job is really understanding that your credibility means the world. It really does. A lot of big decisions are made on your ability to deliver on your word and on your deal. And so I have a very heavy burden over my shoulders to look at any given development project, any given project, and form a very sound opinion, and a solid one, with fundamentals behind it, because I know that a lot of money's behind it. I know that it lies really heavily on me to carry it through and to close on a deal. Whether it's a $5 million deal, whether it's a $20 million deal, it's a big decision to make, and I've got to be able to sit down and look around at the board of directors and look around investment committees and tell them that this is a solid deal. It's something that we're going to be, paid back on. So going back to my typical deal, my typical day, it's usually a 10-hour day, 10 to 12-hour day, and 90% of it to 100% of it is spent dealing with people. Sure, there's different departments that I have to interact with. A lot of attorneys are involved in the construction department. I've got to kind of be a jack of all trades. It's not enough to just know how to underwrite a deal or look at the NOI. That's the very superficial aspect of my job. It's kind of the starting point, and then it goes on from there. There's so many different things. I have to approve leases sometimes for owners. I've got to send out engineers, I've gotta make sure the budgets are balanced as the project continues. So you do get to have a wide variety of activities and it ranges widely in scope. But overall, I manage people at the end of the day, their expectations, whether it's internally or externally. So I spend a lot of the days turning off fires and responding to somebody's immediate need. And then along the way, I can get to have a very nice lunch with a client and, walk around some projects. That's a good day.
So the same thing, I mean, there's really no typical day. Every day is really different. I mean, there is one guarantee that I wake up and I'm at the office by call at 7:30 the latest. And there's different hats for different days. One day I might put on my lawyer hat, close the door, and I'm working on leases, a contract for sale, or loan docs, whatever it is. There's other days where I'm sort of managing my property managers. What's happening on a site? Are we building out a new tenant, and do I need to be there? Other days where I'm managing the portfolio's finances. We do reporting monthly, quarterly, and annually. This time of the year it's budgets, so it's hell right now because you're working long hours trying to put budgets together. And then there's other days where I'm on site, trying to find that next deal. What feels good? Where's the next one? Where's the next Midtown? And it's constantly trying to find that next deal. Then besides that, I mean, that's it really, I would say.
I think for me, because Equity One is a very high volume company in South Florida, a lot of times instead of doing, so I manage all their operational stuff, so instead of doing, you see UFITs opening all over the place, so instead of doing one UFIT deal, I think I've done 7 in the past year. So the fun thing for me is that you get to repeat certain things quite a bit over a short period of time, so you actually get to really start to get better at some of this stuff. It might be, a tenant assignment taking place where somebody else is trying to buy the business. So you might have reviewed 15 different tenant financials that month. So you really get to know the people in your portfolio, you get to know the numbers, you get to know all the different detailed parts of having these retail centers, where if you were just with any typical property management company, maybe you'd have 6 or 8 shopping centers and maybe very few duplicate tenants, that type of thing. So I think a typical day at Equity One really just involves a ton of stuff, and some of it's going to be new and some of it's stuff that I've done before that I'm getting better at. So I think that's the thing that's a little bit unique about this company.
What have you learned and utilized from the MSRED program here in Nova that you use today, and that you use in your day-to-day activities at work? Andrew, you start.
So there's a couple of things. I think me not having any background in real estate, the first few courses really set a great foundation. It really taught me everything, not everything, but it's set what I really needed to learn. And then the second was the modeling classes and the financials. Starting off as an analyst, it really set a great background as to what needed to get done and how to get there.
I learned the importance of good communication skills. I think if every one of the classes that we took, we were forced to kind of come out of our own skin and learn how to build on each other's strengths, and that's really important. What's also really important is to recognize your weaknesses, and the more you familiarize yourself with those weaknesses, the better off you're going to be, because your goal should be to be a better version of yourself the next day, right? So I think I learned very quickly that it's a people business. And I think I learned very quickly that you need to understand the numbers, you need to understand the developer's vision, you also need to understand how an investor looks at their returns, right? So it's a combination of things. I learned very quickly that you can't box yourself into thinking that you know it all. You have to reinvent yourself at every corner. So I got a lot out of the program on an interpersonal basis, and I think you guys signed up for something really, really great, and it's gonna propel you to the next level if you commit to assessing yourself and working on those weaknesses and leveraging on your strengths.
I gotta pick up on something you said, but, yeah, I mean, my background is I was kind of winging it. I'd buy property, renovate it. I caught property in Boston after the last financial crisis in the early '90s, and I was buying RTC and FDIC property, and buy something, you hire the general contractor, you design it. I mean, I could just do this all myself. What I learned in the program was there's actually, from a commercial perspective, there's like, oh, you can actually plan this out, and there's really a way to do it, and I didn't know that. And so, yeah, so that's, it learned much more corporate, commercial, organizational structure of how to do things, and most people don't know how to do that. And a lot of contractors, look at most contractors who build houses. Most of those guys just started out as a carpenter, became a contractor, they built one house, then they built 2 or 3 houses, and then they only have, their creativity is very minimal. They have maybe 4 different, sometimes only 2 different models of houses that they build, and that's as big as they can think, because they're so busy just building houses and buying land and closing on each house. And from a commercial perspective, there's obviously a lot more you can do, but so it's expanded my thinking, enormously. I've reached a point in my life where I don't want to take a lot of risk anymore, and because I've had some great successes, but I've also had some failures, and as you get older, the failures hurt more. But yeah, learning the organizational structure, I would say, was the most key thing, and understanding how, all the commercial, the commercial operations work, industrial, retail, multifamily, so on and so forth.
I think the big takeaway for me, and I didn't realize it till a year or 2 after the program, but I graduated in '09, so 6 years ago. But I think it was really getting to know the people that were in my class that I graduated with. I got hooked up with a mentor through the program, and he and I still do breakfast every other month or every month. 6 years later, I bought properties from people who were in the class. The banker on one of my first deals was somebody that graduated the program. So we've got a really strong network here. While I was going through the program, you tend to work with the same group of people on every project, or the same handful of people that you sit next to, that type of thing. But most of the people I wound up really working with after the program were people that I really knew that well while I was in the program. And I wish I'd done a better job of that, because maybe the network would be that much bigger. But it definitely proved very valuable.
So anything that you felt was missing in the program at that point in time, any of you, all of you, that you felt like that there was any sort of component that you felt like that maybe needed to be added or should be added, or you felt deficient on, or anything?
I think being on the financial side, Argus was a big thing, but from what I understand, Argus is now a class.
2 classes, actually.
2 classes.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that.
The
Modeling class, yeah.
Well, I think, even this is a good example. I think when I was in the program, there wasn't much of this, where you have a panel of people who are recently a few years out of the program, and you can get to know and interact with.
Yeah, I would say I signed up to the program in large respect to, for the financial side of things and understanding returns. And so I felt like walking away from the program, the one thing I wish I would have known a little bit more about was just what happens after NOI, right? So how do those water flows really work? How do you really get down to, where's the money go?
Right. How
is it distributed? So I think that's the one thing that I would have liked to have explored a little bit more while I was here, as opposed to on my own.
Yeah. What about you, Glenn?
Yeah.
They covered it. I did the cohort at the same time as Andrew, Claudia, and Jen, actually. So I think we had very similar feelings, and we all saw some common lacks as far as Argus and financial side. I can't emphasize how important that part is. I'm sure Matt and Al will tell you that. We'll all tell you this, that the majority of the jobs that are out there for you are going to be somewhat financial based. real estate is not just a people business, not just a piece of property. I mean, you really have to understand the numbers. And I think once you can understand the numbers, you're a huge asset to somebody. A lot of real estate companies are small. You know, you have your publicly traded companies and whatnot, but you also have a lot of small little shops, especially here in South Florida. And you need to bring something to them. You need to bring a skill to the table. And a lot of these guys that have the equity to invest, they don't have maybe the Excel skills or the Argus skills, and they don't know how to do the modeling. So that's what you can contribute to the deal.
How important were like the competitions that you guys did, like the NAIOP competition and some of the others? Can you maybe talk about the experiences with that?
Andrew can probably talk more about that. I wasn't really that involved with it, but they won the NAIOP challenge when they presented.
Yes.
I think one of the biggest things was it allowed you to get yourself out there. You know, it was a competition. Competitions are great, and you get to learn your partners better, but you're also able to present. I think we presented to what, 100 or 200 people, but it was of the people who are. It was Terry Stiles, and it was these guys who you really want to get your face in front of, and when you do a good job, they acknowledge that.
I think it opened up a lot of opportunities as well. And I still walk into events, whether it's ULI or NAIOP, and people that I've yet to meet, come up to me and say, weren't you in that NAIOP challenge, a couple of years ago? And they still remember and recognize. And I'll tell you, it's a great opportunity to get your hands wet and utilize all the skills that you've been learning and put them to use. And people would readily raise their hands to help you along the way. You'll find that you'll be knocking on doors as a student, seeking guidance, and everybody's willing to, open those doors and say, sure, sit down, let's talk. So it's a good way for you to get through the door and seek out that mentorship that you really do need in the field.
So what about, you mentioned the professional associations like NAIOP and ULI. One of the things that we're doing now is we're paying for the subscriptions to NAIOP and ICSC and ULI and a couple of other professional organizations. And so could you guys maybe talk a little bit about your own sort of involvement with those different associations, or which ones that maybe you think are the most important or beneficial, why they're important and beneficial, that sort of thing?
Sure.
So, I mean, the two big ones for me, I thought when I got my CPM designation and then when I got the CCIM designation. And the CPM is the big one for commercial management, the CCIM is the big one for, I guess, commercial leasing, finance, brokerage, that type of thing. But the program, and I've done something recently for Jessica on it, but the program here allows you to exempt out of a lot of the preliminary coursework for the CPM designation. And then once you have the CPM, you can use that to exempt out a lot of the preliminary coursework for the CCIM designation, because a lot of the same materials covered in the class here, but the designations are widely recognized and give you an extra leg up when you're dealing with other people in the industry. So those are two that I was really involved with and spent a lot of time with.
I think the two most important for me, especially as a student, was ULI and ICSC. More because it gave me a chance to really network. I was able to really pull out that I'm a Nova student. Can you help me out? And they were more forthcoming with information, knowing that you're a student and they're trying to help you out. And even still, I mean, it's a great way to network. I go to events, I don't want to say monthly, maybe bi-monthly, every other month or so, and it's a great way to see an old face.
Great, so I'm involved in ULI and NAIOP as well, ICSC to some extent. I should be a lot more involved considering that I do a lot of retail financing. But I think the greatest benefit that you get out of those organizations is the access to people that are seasoned, to people that, again, with that introductory card of I'm a graduate student, everybody wants to help you, everybody wants to see you succeed. And so I've been able to do a lot of deals with people just because of my involvement, and it's great to get started at this point, as I said, because it'll help you out with conversations and introductions. Some of you may not have a lot of experience in the field, but a student card gets you a long way. I can't emphasize it enough.
Rebecca, do you have a question real quick?
Yeah, I have a question concerning your networking, and the ULI events are great. I've been to this, one we went to the other day, and I've been to some with my boss too, honestly. But like, when you go and you go to network, like, I get intimidated, and I'm a pretty outgoing person, so like, what are your experience like to go up to like a group of like older, more experienced people and just say hi, like, I'm Rebecca, graduate student at NSU, and like get their information, and I don't know, I'm just like get intimidated by those things.
That's normal.
I would say try to have a question for them. Try to have an industry question of some kind in the back of your head, you know, and maybe try to know a little bit about what their company is or what they do or something, and what their project is they're working on, and kind of ask them about that. You know, we're kind of opening the door of the question instead of just saying, you know, just kind of introduce yourself.
And I think I feel the same way you do a lot of times, just, you know, not a very social, I'm the opposite, I'm not a social person. But I think what I try to do is, instead of meeting, you know, 30 people at an ICS event or something, maybe you target 3 or 4 people and you really seek them out, and you spend time researching them or their company before you go into the event.
Like before you go.
Yeah, and then you wait till they're outside of the big crowd, you wait till they're alone or they're getting a drink or something like that, and really just selectively go for those couple people. Then when you follow up with them, follow up in a really strong way, and just go about that way.
It's a really good point to sort of jump off on that, to ties it back into that. One of the things that typically, like NAOP and ULI, most of these organizations do, is they've, you know, started publishing before the event who's attending, so that it does give you that chance to kind of, you know, say, oh wow, this person's going to be there. Let me, you know, potentially seek them out and cyber stalk them and find out, you know, a little bit more about them, so that I can, you know, potentially, you know.
Right. So a couple of other tips. So show up early, because it's a lot less intimidating when there's less people in the room, and people are more willing to start conversations, because they already have an idea of who they are going to target and who they do want to talk to, and so they're usually on the lookout for one person or another. So if you're there early, you have a better chance. And people love to talk about themselves. You know? So be genuinely interested in the person, and do target those people. And when you approach them, you know, have some kind of knowledge as to what they do, and that will just help you. And, you know.
I would just add to that I thought that ULI associations were extremely helpful when I was a student, because ULI, ISC, and so forth, because it allowed me to explore like what the different sides of the business felt like to me. And it turns out now I'm still somewhat involved with ULI, just because I like it a lot, and I love urban planning and so forth. But I'm involved with IREM, because IREM is through real estate managers, because I'm in the management arena. So I don't have my membership anymore to ICSC and so forth, because, you know, there's no point really for me anymore. It's been several years. And we also went to our program, so this was like 5 years ago, I guess. We went to the ULI convention in Los Angeles one year, and the ULI convention in Washington, D.C. the next year, and that was really pretty beneficial. But it was it was a big endeavor to go on a trip, basically.
And there's a lot of smaller kind of underground networking groups too, as opposed to the big, you know, ICSC conventions, that type of thing. I mean, you may have groups, and for me, some of these are some of the most effective, but you may have a group of just 20 people who, you know, I have a group of higher level asset managers. We meet maybe twice a year and just really talk about the stuff that really impacts our day. There's another group that's like a brotherhood. They meet in Miami, and it's really all small time developers, people who are buying their first, second, third, you know, $3 million to $6 million shopping center. So you say, okay, that's where I'm at. These are the people who are most productive for me. Whereas if you're at a big ICSC event, you know, maybe there's 200 leasing folks, maybe there's 300 development folks, and it's hard to you know, network your way through it.
And ICSC also has a mentorship program. So if you went to the Florida conference, was it last year or the month before that, they allow you, or they set you up with some high profile retailer, and you sit down one-on-one with them for, call it an hour, maybe 2. And then with that also is the ULI Young Leader Group. They have events, call it bi-monthly, and it's a group of, it probably turns out to be 30 or 40 people, and it's people of your age. It's under, I think it's 35, I want to say.
Yeah, those young leader events are a lot less intimidating, and everybody's on this relatively same page. I mean, nobody's at those events to like make you feel dumb or anything like
Yeah,
that.
you should all go to Young Leader events, whatever organization you're most interested in, because that is,
Yeah, both NAIOP and ULI both have their own
Correct.
versions
Yeah.
of the young leader
Yeah, they
kind
do.
of,
Yeah.
And I know Chris mentioned it a little bit, his mentorship program here at Nova. I don't know if you guys can give a little light on that and talk about your experience with your mentor and
yeah, who was your mentor and kind of what relationships did you have and maybe do you have?
right.
So I was paired up with Harry. Has he come into the classroom?
Not yet. Well,
Okay,
not, well,
Harry
he
goes-
has, but not with
Okay.
this group.
Okay, so Harry was the head of the president of, oh geez, he was a home builder,
Minto.
Minto.
labeling company now.
So, yeah, so he was extremely helpful. He was extremely helpful because when I walked into, I have to be honest, when I walked into this program, I wanted to know it all. I didn't want to leave a stone unturned. And I thought that the biggest failure would have been to walk out of this program not being a developer and not being able to do it right away. And as a matter of fact, I will also admit that when I went to my first ULI conference, I ordered 3 boxes of books. You know, they typically have like a setting in the back of the conference and you have everything from, you know, TDRs to, you know, entitlements and I said one of that, one of that, one of that, one of that, and, you know, ship it all to my house. I'm there. So I had a passion and I really wanted to carry it through. And so I had trouble taking a step back and being a little bit realistic. So when I met with my mentor, he really helped me to see the way a little bit more clearly. So the conversation went something like, Claudia, you're not gonna be a developer, and I can guarantee you're not gonna be a developer, you know, at least in the next 5 years. So why don't you take a step back? Why don't you look at where you are today? Why don't you look at what's available to you? Why don't you look at the great platform that you have of developers, of, you know, of people that are already in the field, and why don't you start networking? And why don't you, you know, so the road to success doesn't look like this. You know, you can get there in many different ways. And get out of your head. You know, just get out of your head. Anything is possible. And so, so he helped me to see that where I was at that point in time was the best place to be, because I didn't have the capital to go on my own. I didn't have the knowledge to do it on my own. But if I surrounded myself with people that had done it and that had passion and had vision, then all of that can, at some point in time, transform and place me closer to my goal. So, so he helped me to just narrow the path a little bit for me. And there were very honest conversations, and I definitely did my homework every time before meeting with him, and I didn't want to waste his time. They're volunteering their time to help you and to propel you to the next level, but, you know, you have to acknowledge that, and you have to go in there with some level of research, some idea of where you want to be, and you have to be honest with yourself and make the time worthwhile. So it was very helpful. We still keep in touch. We see each other. Maybe last time I saw him was maybe 4 months ago at a ULI event. So it's very helpful, but it's good. It's what you make of it. They're not there to tell you what you're best at. They're there to see your vision and narrow it down for you and help you get into your path.
I didn't really pursue the mentorship a whole lot, so I can't really speak to that very much.
So my mentor, well, before I tell you who my mentor was, it's, you have to realize that the mentorship program, it's on you. It's not on the mentor. You know, I know some people who met with their mentor one time. I know some people who met with their mentor every month and still have a great relationship with them. So it's really for you and how you want to handle it. You can't expect them to reach out and say, hey Andrew, let's meet. It's really in your hands. My mentor was Styles, and it was great because it was great to meet him, but also because he opened up his doors. He allowed me to meet with anybody from his leasing agents to his head of construction, head of acquisitions, everybody. We met probably once a month during the program, and a date, we Maybe not as often now, but call it morning coffee every 3-4 months.
I was connected with Terry through the mentor program also. We still do breakfast probably every other month or so. And I mean, I second your comments. I mean, he couldn't be a more just incredible human being as far as connecting you with anybody, everything that works. But I think the best part of it for me is that when you're showing up to breakfast every 2 months with somebody like that, you better be kicking ass. You better show up with something that you've done recently that you're really, killing it. Because you don't want to show up to me and say, oh, I'm showing up my 9 to 5, and I'm doing my 9 to 5, and I'm going home and going to sleep. You got to be just nailing it. And after a few months of having to do that, when I would meet with him, it gradually becomes a habit where you're saying, oh, man, I got to be doing this. I got to be more on top of stuff. I got to be pushing the envelope. So I think that for me has been the best part of the mentor program, to have access to somebody like that who demands that type of, I don't know, on the other side of the table. They want to see something. They want to see you doing something. They want to see that their time is being well spent.
And Glenn, what about you?
To be honest, I really utilize my mentorship program as much as I maybe should have. I don't know, but my mentor was like 3 hours away. He was on the legal side. We didn't really have much to discuss. I was fortunate enough to I had worked for Michael Cannon, who was a mentor to me. Unfortunately, he passed away 2 years ago, but I went to him he was my go-to, and I felt like that was whoever I always bounced ideas off of and got to seek advice for, and so that was who I utilized. I mean, I don't know, right or wrong or whatever, but that's what I did. So I kind of shy away from that question as much as possible. So
Still made it, man.
I'm making it. I'm still alive. So one of the questions that I wanted to find out is what kind of skill sets you need, to be successful at your job. What kind of
skills? I think hard work is definitely a prerequisite for anything. I think showing up early, I think putting in the time and making your hours count, I think is a huge prerequisite. You can work the same 8 hours as everybody else, or you can make your 8 hours just 16 to like 20. I think that's a big prerequisite, and I think, over time in my line of work, you learn to, I don't know, really see people for what they are when they come to meet with you. If it's a tenant coming to meet with you about assistance for the business, or somebody looking to expand their business, or on the tenant side, when you're dealing with them after a while, you get to really know who's got on the ball, who doesn't, who's going to be a problem, who's not. So I think that really helps after a while, and I imagine it's probably the same thing when you deal with new clients and you're doing it. But those are the two big things for me.
Yeah, I would say the same thing is really one, your work ethic. Real estate's not a 9 to 5. Sometimes it's 7 in the morning till 1 a.m. Sometimes it's you're on the road traveling, and other times it's a half a day. But you have to do what you do with integrity and really like what you do, because if you don't like it, you're not going to enjoy it, and if you don't enjoy it, your work's not going to be good. And then the other thing I think also, I'm blanking for a second, sorry. Skill set. The other skill set besides hard, I guess that's it really, just hard,
Andrew, you probably have
networking.
financial skills.
I'm sorry, so networking, that's it. So many of the deals that I do, especially that are off market, it's not a just, here's an offer. It's something that takes, sometimes I'm on a deal now that's taken almost 4 years. It's a deal that I've built a relationship with, and he now trusts me, and he knows that the property's going into good hands.
And also financial.
Yeah, I mean, definitely financial skills, I think especially if you're going in as a newbie, the best skills is to have is finance, analysis, modeling, Argus, because no matter where you are, you really have to understand those numbers.
If anyone has Excel questions, you can call Andrew. I still do it. Claudia?
So I would say financial skill set, without a doubt, but that's just the beginning. So, you know, if you're interested in a career, you know, you choose finance as the segment within our industry, and without saying you have to be financially literate, you have to be able to understand very well performance, and not the numbers and not in the, you know, numeric sense and the mechanical sense, but the interpretation of those numbers. You know, so that's a skill set that you develop along the way and with experience. Nobody expects you to fully understand until you're on the ground and you encounter that live deal, so to speak. So it takes a while. It's a long path. It really is, but it pays off. It's a very rewarding industry at every level, you know, regardless of what it is that you do. I think I feel very fulfilled in what I do when I can, you know, take a look at a piece of land and then come back to it and work through it, because things are bound to go wrong. The one thing you know is that things are not going to turn out as you expected. And when that happens, you need to have the skill set to resolve it. You're in, and you're in from the time that you fund the first block until the time that that building gets completed. And you know, and although you like to say, well, you need to be strong in financial analysis, which I said is a prerequisite, at the end of the day, until the project doesn't get built, you're not going to see a first dollar back. So you're pregnant and you're in there for the life of the project. So I think that's definitely important. I think communication skills again, and work ethic. It's irreplaceable. And if you enjoy what you're doing, it comes with it. You know, you're not gonna want to separate home life from work life. It just kind of seamless. You know, it just encompasses you. It's what you do. It's real estate.
I would also emphasize financial modeling skill sets, because that's really what, especially as it develops a little bit older, that's what they're looking for people to do. That was always a challenge for me, quite frankly. These three right here, and I don't know, I have to pick up school with Chris, but Claudia, Glenn, and Andrew were always really good at financial modeling, and I, you know, picked it up as best as I could. I can work with Microsoft Excel fine, but I'm not so great at, you know, creating a spreadsheet. And that was always a challenge for me, because, you know, it just wasn't my forte. And quite frankly, I wasn't really introduced to financial modeling earlier in my career, so it wasn't part of my life growing up in my career earlier. And it came out, you know, quite well after I got out of undergrad. But so pick up as much as that as you possibly can grab a hold of and spend time on that. It'll really set you apart from people who don't know how to do it. And it's important, it's super important in this industry, because financial modeling is the lifeblood of the industry. So the language that, you know, that they speak. Other than that, yeah, it's you know, your work ethic and integrity is key, because you know, you're gonna move up faster in any organization if you work harder than the next guy. And if you just are creative and keep reading and staying knowledgeable of, you know, the ULI articles, the magazines, the websites, and what's, you know, everything's going on in the industry.
And then with that also said, on the modeling front, I mean, I know a lot of people who know how to model, but there's also a lot of people who know how to model and don't know what the inputs do. So it's really becoming familiar with how things change with other models. How does your rent change your NOI? How does expenses? Is it base year? Is it gross? Is it nets? You know, so there's so many different variables that can make a deal work or not work. Are you underwriting a 6.5 cap or a 7.5 cap? You know, it might work at a 6.5, but it might not work at a 7.5. So it's really understanding the inputs of each model.
I'm sorry, to finalize that and to add to what you just said, it's really important to keep abreast of the industry, overall. So, you know, all of this is great, the work ethic, you know, the mechanics of building a model, but you're only as good as, you know, how you interpret all these things that are going on globally, locally, within the sub-market that you're looking at. So it's really important to keep abreast and read those publications and read newspapers and make it a habit to wake up every morning and see what is going on around you and how it may affect your last decision and your next decision.
So one of the things that, you know, is obviously a challenge within this industry because it's, you know, it's not a traditional career path. And, you know, so a lot of the folks, whenever they enter into a program like this, you know, sometimes the expectation is it's going to be like getting an accounting degree where you know you're going to go to work for an accounting firm and there's going to be this stair-step progression of your income and that sort of thing. And this industry could not be farther away from that, you know, in terms of you know, very fragmented employment and you know, really trying to, you know, find a job sometimes is a challenge because in many instances those are not jobs that are even posted. That, you know, my experience has been, and I'm sure yours has as well, that sometimes it is the networking that you actually even find out about a job that, you know, is potentially available and are able to make connections through some of the folks that maybe you've met not only through the program but, you know, mentors or whoever, you know, so that sort of thing. But one of the things that we're starting this year that I was talking to the students about earlier is they're being required to do an electronic portfolio. So that each of the classes they're taking in the program, they're going to be putting in that portfolio all of their PowerPoint presentations, all of their Excel models or Argus models or their exams, you know, all of that will be contained within this sort of digital resume, if you will, that they can then use to help sort of showcase, here is my work that I have done throughout the program to a prospective employer. What do you think about that as a concept? Do you think that's you know, you think that would be a useful tool, or do you think, you know, can you envision that as being something that would be of value or not, from your perspective?
I think a lot of companies, I don't think they even realize what an MSRED program, you know, offers and what you get going with the program. So I think it's a great way to show potential company, hey, listen, this is what I did. I may not have, you know, 10 years of work experience, but I do have, you know, these 5 presentations I did. This is the case study I did. This is the models I did. You know, I think it's a great way of really selling yourself at an interview or whether you're sitting in front of a bank or whatever job or whatever. So I think it's an excellent idea. Why not keep it digital? I'm a big fan for keeping things on the computer. So.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it continues once you start working too. I mean, if I come across a great acquisitions model, I say, wow, that was really well done, then I copy it and I save it for later and I practice on it, try to understand it and say, oh, they, you know, modeled in this and they did this, and then you figure out how it's done, and you take that stuff with you through your whole career. So when it's time for you to maybe want to acquire your own shopping center, you say, hey, I'm going to use this thing that I got, or I'm going to use this. But yeah, I think it's a great way to increase the range of what you can do and be able to show employers, I'm not just capable of handling this, but I've also handled, you know, all of this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same feeling. I think a portfolio is one of the things that you should really concentrate on because an interview only tells about yourself, you know, how good you interview, how good you speak, but it doesn't showcase off any skills. You know, I'm horrible at interviewing, and when I had my first interview with Correct, I went in there with a whole portfolio, and I said, look, I could do OMs, I could do flyers, I could do models, I could do Argus, because it really shows them, hey, look, you know, this kid is really capable of these things, you know, because anybody can really say that they could do Argus on a resume, but to actually show them is a whole nother level.
Depending on the size of the company, you may be showing them something that they haven't, you know, done before to the extent that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. I mean, more often than not, you're going to have to be very dynamic in your approach to get through the door and to get people to consider hiring you if you don't have experience. So to the extent that you can document that and that you can, you know, carry it with you and say, here, you know, take a look. Don't take my word for it. Let's, you know, join me. Let's take a look at this. I think it'll put you in a better competitive position.
I want to jump on what Dr. Forgy said. I think that sounds amazing, actually, putting an online resume with your digitized work and reports that you've done. I haven't heard that being done, but it sounds like such an obvious next step, using technology for sort of an online resume format, just so any employer or somebody who's thinking about hiring you for an internship or anything can go there and see that. What I've observed in my career in different sides of real estate is that you would be amazed how many small developers are doing projects and doing things, and they're all doing it from the gut and from the back of an envelope. They're not using pro formas at all. They don't know how. Really, a lot of these guys just don't know how. And I think you guys should really, absolutely, while you're still in the program, take advantage of, it's not much networking as you can, any internships that you can, because then you're going to start meeting people. And there's a lot of small developers out there you can still learn things from, but you'd probably be very helpful, beneficial to their office if you can go into them and show them, or send them to your website that shows that you know how to put together a pro forma, or put together run some just simple basic financial modeling. That could be really beneficial.
So did any of you guys have, we've been Glenn and I have been kind of dominating the question thing, so what about you guys? Freddie?
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned they don't expect you to know everything when you come in to a company. For example, if you're a real estate analyst, what type of training would they give you, if any, coming into the company? That's open. I think Andrew or Glenn can speak to that more.
Expect not to have very much training.
Okay.
You're getting your training now.
Yeah,
I think it really depends on the company. There's larger Fortune 500 companies that'll give you the training and give you the dollars to go for an artist class or this or that. Whereas I was said, hey, here it is, figure it out. But I think that's a better way, because when I'm hiring, I look for people who are hard working, knowing that they'll fail 10 times, but then on the 11th time they'll get it right, because then that time after that they already know what to do, how to do it. So for me to say, hey, 2 + 2 is 4, you're not really learning, right?
So, will they give you a chance to fail like that?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Of course.
Because this is big deals. I'm thinking you don't fail on the big deal,
I think what
And I think-
what's interesting is you have to figure it out yourself, and then come to him if you have some, after you tried a few times. Say, hey, listen, I tried 2 + 2, that didn't work. I tried 4 + 4, that didn't work. Can you maybe point me in the right direction, or what am I doing wrong here? This number doesn't make any sense. But when I first got on the acquisition side, the company I worked for is a Montreal-based company, and I was the only one here in South Florida. It was really challenging for me to try to figure everything out, and thankfully I had people like Andrew and Claudia stuff to call to say, hey, this doesn't make sense to me or whatever. But I would say that when looking at jobs right now, look at the skill set. Take advantage of the fact that you have professors like Dr. Forgy to come to and say, hey, I'm interested in this job. These are the skills that they require. I'm not sure if I really understand how to do X or Y. Can you maybe stay with me for an hour and talk to me about it, or can we talk about it in the next class? Or there's some basic stuff that they're going to expect. Any employer is going to expect out of you. That there's certain real estate related math that's required. They're going to want to know how you get your IRRs, your net present values, your cash on cash returns. There's certain metrics that are just required out of you, which I'm sure you'll get out of midway through this program, or at some point.
One thing to sort of add to what Freddie, I think where you're coming from, I would argue that most companies, and at least the ones I've been affiliated with, they're going to have probably so many checks and balances along the way to make sure that the work that you do is going to be checked by him, and then that work's going to be checked by her, and ultimately on down the line to because, as you say, there could be millions of dollars on the line. One company that I worked for many years ago, Oryx Capital Markets, one of the big things they had to calculate were yield maintenance premiums, and they literally would have 5 people within the organization do the calculation independently of each other, and then get together as a group to make sure that it was right. you know, and which way it was right. So, you know, the point of not necessarily understanding or doing it right the first time, you know, there's usually going to be a check and balance in that sort of situation.
So I'd like to answer that question as well. So I started off as a real estate analyst. So I can tell you, at least within the banking industry, so there's different levels of analysis. You're not going to be given a $200 million project on your first day. So a lot of banks usually provide some kind of training. They provide an executive development training where you start off as an analyst, but they take you through a whole series of courses as to how to underwrite a deal. And so they invest a lot in their employees, and they still do that today. So there's several institutions that I can think of that still offer that. And it people that work for me, I never look for the most knowledgeable person. In fact, I look for the person that is willing to tell me exactly what they know and what they don't know, so that can be our starting point. So it's, and again, going back to your strengths and your weaknesses, you have to know them. And so that way you can place yourself in the right institution with the right people, with the right group, and grow from there.
Other questions?
Yes, so if you come in as an analyst at Equity One, a lot of times you'll be paired up with a senior analyst, so they'll be tasked with the actual project themselves. You'll handle components of it for them, and then over time, the components that you handle get larger and larger and larger until you're doing the whole thing yourself. And so that's the way they kind of work it in informally over the course of the first 6, 12, 18 months.
Yeah, and I think there's always someone that's, whatever company you start with is willing to help you, as long as you put in the effort, and they have to tell you more than a couple times, explain something to you more than a couple times, you don't get it, obviously that's a problem. But if you, people are willing to help as long as you're willing to put in the time to it.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. That I think in industry, there is that tendency that, to a large extent, it's like you tell it to them once, they don't get it the first time. It's sometimes that's it. You're deemed to be not competent enough to be able to handle it. And so I think there's not a lot of chances sometimes in those sort of situations.
But there's no, I mean, if you could really just think it through, and I had a boss was telling me, just follow the money. If it's financial modeling you're doing, just follow the money and make sure it makes sense. That, and I mean, it sounds foolish, but there's Google. You can find pretty much anything today on I don't care what it is, you can Google whatever you want, you're going to find the answer to it. So make the effort. You have it on your phone, before you look stupid. Go in there. I know it sounds kind of, whatever, but I guess I'm a little prideful to ask too many questions, so that's the approach I take. I have a coworker, she has no problem asking 1,000 questions, and it's fine. So it's all depends on what you're willing to do.
And I think, no matter whether it's analyst or whether it's Ben was going to be, his Westalis was going to be on the panel today as an asset manager. He was doing a lease with Academy Sports. They were trying to negotiate a provision. He wasn't sure if he should give it to him or not. He called me. We have 4 leases with them in our portfolio, so I was able to go through and say, yes, you can give them this, but you also want to take this in return. So the people in your class will wind up being that extra little help where
That's
you
a
might
tremendous
go.
asset to be able to do that when you're negotiating deals, to be able to get some of that inside knowledge is a big advantage.
Any other questions?
I would like to know how, like she said, it's like a very stressful day, and it's like a long day, and it's like your personal life kind of like mixing, because it's your passion, is what you do. How do you handle stress? How do you handle pressure? Like you said, inside pressure, outside pressure, like I know you run in the morning, but like what else?
Probably also on the winery.
How do you handle pressure? That's a loaded question. I think I'm happy going to bed at night knowing that I did the best that I possibly could, and I mean that. And so long as I can own up to that and I can live up to that, then everything else will take care of itself. Now, listen, you're gonna be pulled in different directions. There's a lot of money at stake. There's a lot of big personalities involved, and that's usually what gets in the way a lot of the times in negotiations and in carrying a project through. Again, you're dealing with a wide variety of personalities and big groups of people that need to come together to a consensus to develop something larger than themselves. So I think that you deal with stress by acknowledging that there's a solution to every problem, and bouncing ideas off of people, and kind of, you know, cross-checking your decisions when you're unsure, and accepting the fact that no decision that you make is going to be risk-proofed, right? There's going to be some level of a setback at some point, and there's going to be some unknown circumstance that's going to pull you in a different direction, but it's okay because everything is long-term. You have to take a long-term vision to things. I don't know if that answers your question, but it helps to know that you're doing your best and living up to that.
I would definitely agree with what Javier says, but in terms of like handling stress, I mean, you know, you guys are getting out of the program soon, but you know, keep developing yourself as a person outside of even real estate and, you know, education and so on and so forth. Try to have some type of physical fitness outlet of whatever it is, even if it's just walking, you know, to go for a long walk once a day or every other day or something. And frankly, I do meditation periodically. Meditation, if you have a really stressful job, meditate. If you have an extremely stressful job with a lot of money at stake, meditate more. That's what you know, a lot of these kind of, you know, personal growth gurus will tell you, because, and that's what, if you look at what, you know, captains of industry do, they always have a personal coach or a business coach. They have you know, practice all kinds of things outside of just, you know, going to work and coming home, going to sleep. You know, you have to develop yourself, your own person, your mind especially. You know, stay physically fit, have some physical fitness, and have some mind fitness. Be mindful of what, you know, how you're developing yourself outside of your career, whatever your career path is.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, if you know, I think a lot of stress in my life comes if I have 3 or 4 top priorities. Maybe I'm really killing it with 1 or 2 of them, but the other 2 I'm not hitting. That's where I feel the most stress. So I really try to make sure that if I'm going into work super early because work's important to me, then I'm also leaving early that night to make sure I get home to my family, because that's super important. I don't, you know, take time to eat lunch during the day. I eat at my desk, and during lunch I go to the gym, because that's important to me. If you have an hour-long meeting, but you can fit it into 16 minutes, hold it in 16 minutes and get everybody out of the room. You know, things like that, just to make sure that you're always focused on only the things that are most important to you, and don't skip anything. If you got 4 important things, hit them all. Don't just hit 1 or 2.
And in that regard, being very present in what you're doing, right? So you may have 4 different projects that you're working on, but when you're working on that one project, it's time for that one project, 100%. You know, tunnel vision goes into that. And I think to the extent that you can dedicate, so if you are working only 8 hours a day for whatever reason that may be, then make sure those 8 hours are dedicated to reaching exactly what your intention is, you know, so.
Yeah, I think it's also about setting priorities, like Claudia said, you know, it's getting what needs to get done first, but then also knowing that you work your hardest to get that done and everything else, and also setting balances, you know. Work's very stressful, but you have to know how to have time and go to the gym or hang out with your friends or whatever it is, because without that, you're always going to be stressed. But it's also about loving what you do. You know, there's been countless days where I've been extremely stressed, and I'll wake up in the morning knowing that the next day is 10 times harder, but I love what I do, so I'm still excited.
I'm one big ball of stress. So I'm not great. I'm actually just like staying up here, like thinking about like worrying about things. But you know, I make my like to-do list, and those little like sticky notes are all over everywhere, and now like on my phone, on the computer, everywhere. But you know, the to-do list help a lot, and as long as I can go to bed at night knowing that hey, I put my full effort into whatever it was that I was focused on today, and I'm at a good spot, and I didn't, you know, half-ass it, or I didn't, you know, push it off to do later. You know, as long as I think you prioritize, and I'm trying to get a little better at actually, you know, having some sort of balance there. Because I think, especially in this day and age with, you know, cloud and computer, you know, everything that you can just do at home, it's easy to get home, and then, you know, for me, maybe my drive home, I start thinking like, oh, I should have done it this way, or I got this to do, I got that to do, and I get home, I start, you know, before you know it, you spend another 2 or 3 hours working, and then, you know, then the weekend rolls around. Well, you know, I can get a little head start on, you know, from Monday if I start doing, you know, and Andrew's right. I mean, I think the key there is finding that balance and making sure that you're not just devoting yourself. You know, I know Claudia mentioned, you know, 10, 11, 12-hour days, but she's actually really good also at, you know, making time for herself, and family, and friends. So it's tough, and that's something I probably say I struggle most with is trying to find that balance. And you know, it's funny, and I think back on like some stuff that I worried so much about, and they're never a big deal. I'm not that important. Like, there's nothing that was, you know, the world wasn't going to end tomorrow for whatever reason that I thought it was. So, but that's my 2 cents.
And I think the balance now is harder than it's ever been. So you have to be even better at it. You know, companies now, real estate companies, are some of them are as busy as they've ever been with half the amount of employees they used to have. We have half the amount of employees that we had in '07 now, and we're doing more business. So you have to be better at doing that. And it's really hard. It's definitely challenging.
Yeah, actually, my boss just on Friday we were at dinner or lunch, and he was telling me that, you know, the size of our portfolio